You got it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Building 7, it's the intention of the applicant through a contract to move building 7, which is a building on stilts, which I'll show you shortly. However, if that doesn't work out for whatever reason, the applicant would like to gut the interior of building number 7 to inspect the framing for salvage. It's a post and beam or partially post and beam building. And the only way to ascertain, according to the applicant, the health of the woodwork that could be salvaged is to get inside, gut it, and look at that woodwork. This is the building in question. It's on pilings. It's shingle sided, and it's rather close to Lagoon Pond. This is another view of the building from the back. You can see Lagoon Pond Road right there. This is an exterior staircase. You can see it's got one little doghouse dormer and one little traditional dormer, and some large barn doors there and a bay window. It's sort of an amalgam of windows. This is a exterior picture. It gives you a little idea of the condition of the shingles and some of the sash windows. This is what it looks like underneath. There's parking underneath the building presently. The building is on pilings. To the best of my understanding, based on my conversation with the applicant, if the building were demoed or moved, these pilings would be cut down just below grade, and then this whole area would be regraded. This is a picture from the inside of the building. Some of the exposed woodwork that they would like to see is already, some of this woodwork is already exposed, but I think that's a minority. There's a image of the flooring. There's one shot of one gable end of the structure from the inside. There's a picture out the window. You can see a little bit of the marina operation there. Some of the vestigials, storage furniture and whatnot inside of the building. This is one of the staircases. Here you can see the edge of the roof line there on the floor, and some of the insulation. And just to recap some of the conditions that were on the prior decision that would be relative to what's being discussed here today. Condition number 2, Safe Harbor Marina will work with interested third parties as well as the town, or take other opportunities to preserve Building 7 by way of its relocation or disassembly for use off-site in lieu of demolition. Condition 14, prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall provide to the MVC a final building acquisition and removal agreement or other signed agreement as appropriate for the relocation and or reuse of the building. It should be noted the applicant did produce a contract to move the building. And number 20, prior to the removal of the buildings, the applicant shall provide a demolition / removal plan to the LUPC for review and approval. That has happened. And here are some of the elements of that demolition plan. Also, it's a waste control plan. The folks that would be doing the gutting, if permitted, are Encompass Builders. They'd also be the general contractors. So they would also be the general contractors for the demolition of the other buildings that aren't really terribly subject to the conversation here tonight. John Keane Excavation would knock down the other buildings, buildings 5, 6, and 9, not again buildings with the age that would require the scrutiny that the commission is applying to this particular building, building 7. Hay bales would be used to shield the wetlands from debris and silt. There would be a water truck to mitigate dust, and it should be noted that that would be for all the demolition work. And there would be some site improvements post demolition, including a raised planter berm And they would also start implementing parts of the land. That's part of the landscape plan, by the way, but they've included it just to show that they're making progress. And there would be some elements of the drainage plan that would be implemented contemporaneously with some of these demolition projects. Here you can see the buildings 5, 6, and 9 that would be demolished. This is building 7. Its fate, I guess, is up in the air. Here you can see some of the lines drawn for mitigation of dust and silt. This would be where you'd have hay bales and silt barriers here, this blue line.
I'm not sure that's correct. I believe it's the red lines. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies. And even though it's only slightly, it's not terribly germane to the demolition, this is a shot of some of the drainage work that is going to be implemented, including some swales that are going to be vegetative swales that are going to be installed. Not exactly germane to this work. And that's pretty much it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. As I see it, there are two things before us. First is the review and approval of the demolition plan and waste control, which does not address what happens to building 7. As a matter of fact, it says that the bottom building 7 will not be demolished, but the described and marked silt fencing and sediment barrier will be installed. First, we have to address whether the demolition plan is, and we have to approve it. And then we have to listen to the applicant's thoughts regarding building number 7. They have complied with condition number 14. They have a signed contract with Mr. DeBard's group for him to remove building number 7 in exchange for payment of $25,000, actually, payment by the applicant. As I read conditions 2 and 14, the applicant at this point has to preserve building number 7, either relocate it or dismantle it and preserve it. So if they want to demolish it, they are going to have to obtain a modification of the conditions. So those are the two things we have to address. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that buildings, Rich mentioned 5, 6, and 9, but they're not part of this process tonight, correct?
Well, they are to the extent that they are going to be demolished, and we have approved their demolition. We just have to approve the demolition plan that they're now presenting, so they can go ahead and do it. That was.
And I thought, I guess the wording was different in the decision other than what was presented to us, but I thought that they were, as far as building 7 went, they were going to do as best they could to preserve it, or have somebody take it off their hands. But now we're saying that it's got to be preserved no matter what.
That's what the condition says. The condition says the applicant will work with third parties in the town to preserve the building by relocation or disassembly in lieu of its demolition.
I get it. It wasn't really the essence of the discussion, but that's what they agreed to. So I get it.
Yeah, that's what they have to deal with. That's what we have to deal with. Ben, and then Fred, and then I do think we need to hear from Chris and Mr. Guard. I'm sure that.
Did we hear anything from the Conservation Commission in regard to the demolition of those buildings, controls that they wanted to see? And then I haven't seen the signed agreement for the removal of building 7. What is that? I mean, if that meets the condition, I'm not sure what we're discussing here besides saying, yes, that meets the condition, but I haven't seen that.
Well, it was submitted, it was dated, it was signed January the 6th, and it's in the record for the DRI. I reviewed it this morning. I'm sure they would love the other party to that. Oh, Mr. DeBard is here, that's great. if that agreement is implemented, we've got nothing to talk about because he'll move the building. If for some reason that falls apart, then I think they need to be able to figure out what they're going to do with it.
So this, I mean, this is coming in under a modification. I'm not sure we're modifying anything here.
Well, we're not, because I don't think they've applied for modification. They've come to get their demolition plan approved as they are required to do under condition 20. And I think they wanted to let us know what's going on, you know, where they stand with building number 7. They have a contract for it to be removed. They have an executed contract, but I'm sure they'd like to get it removed. And I guess that, you know, they've got to work that out with the other party. Fred?
Yes, I guess my question was, and I believe Ben raised this when we did the original discussion on the demolition of these metal buildings. Are they going to go to a metal recycler, or are they just going to construction trash?
The document indicates that everything's going to Bruno's transfer station and then sent off island. There's no specific reference to recycling the metal. But Chris, maybe you can edify us.
In specific to that, when they demo, they separate the metal out and it goes in separate receptacles off island. So it goes to a recycling facility.
Okay.
Good. Rich, you had your hand up.
Oh, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention that I had spoken to some town officials. No real paperwork is for a move has come across the desks of the head of the DPW or the building commissioner as of yet. Although I'm told that there have been some town emails traded just to ascertain if there were any issues with this move, but I haven't learned if anyone's raised them at this point.
Okay, well, let's hear from the applicant. I'm sure they can clarify where they stand and what they want to do.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to clarify that I guess I wasn't applying for a modification. This was really about the demo of everything else other than building 7. I wanted to put it in front of everyone. We talked about this in the last meeting, is kind of a next step, or what would be our next step if Mr. DeBard could not move the building and that was not a feasible option. I brought in some post and beam companies that specialize in dismantling them and reusing them in a later date. And that really what I want to put in front of you, the LUPC, is that what they asked was for us to remove the interior modern elements of the building so that they could see the frame and they could make a determination if that frame was salvageable, marketable, and what that process would look like. If they come back and they say, yeah, we can market it, then we would demo raise the outside of it. It'd all be done, not with equipment. People would do this. They would strip the exterior, they would strip the posts and beams down, they'd number them, and they would take them away, whether we market them and it's sold to someone else to re-put up somewhere else, or we put them to be repurposed later. That would be part of that process, but it would not be demoed. So I just wanted to, kind of loop you guys in, and kind of that's where we're at so far. If Mr. DeBard can't take the building, so.
Okay. Mr. DeBard, are you able to give us any update on what you're able to do or what you anticipate might happen? Nothing's coming through. We need no audio.
How's that?
That's better.
Hi, everyone. So I have contracted with Hayden Building Movers to relocate the building. We are only relocating it about 100 yards down the road to 51 Lagoon Pond. I've spoken to both Eversource and Verizon, and there is no need, because of the 24-foot height and the height of the blinds, there is no need for any of those to be disrupted, disconnected. I've spoken to the Tisbury Police Department about having a police detail to block off traffic from the post office exit, just the safe harbor side of that, to Skiff Ave for the approximately half a day that we need to do it. And for the sake of the move, we will be moving the building to that site for safekeeping until we also permanently affix it on the site when a foundation is done and we get the proper permits to do so. But we are anticipating and planning to do it by the end of the month. So all of this is, we have a plan in place to do that, and the parties that we need to participate are.
Great. That's good news. I guess, Chris, Scott, have you folks, in order for Jeff to do what he just described, do you folks have to first get a demo / removal permit from the town? Oh, you're muted.
I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that we have already had the electricity disconnected and the water is set to be disconnected, and those final sign-offs are kind of on their way. I don't know, because it's not necessarily being demolished. I'm not sure on what that permit would look like, because it's not being demolished, it's just being moved. So
I don't know if there's a different permit or a different aspect of that permit, but it sounds like you and Jeff can check with the town and find out what permitting is required. And I'm sure you've got to work with the fire department and the police department to make that happen. But it's really good news to hear that it's happening, so that the backup plan of possibly requiring a modification to look into disassembly, we don't even have to address any further. You can always come back if for some reason the plan to relocate the building doesn't happen. But Linda had her hand up, and then Ben.
Yes, I actually have two questions. First of all, although I know the area, I certainly don't know the street addresses. So it's being moved in which direction along the lagoon shore? Can someone show us where it's going?
Sure. Linda, it is going towards Five Corners. It is
From where? Towards Five Corners from where?
From where it is,
from where
which is the marina.
Oh, okay, so on the road, along the lagoon.
Yes, there is a 100-foot wide lot that's virtually across from the Tisbury printer, which is 51 Lagoon Pond, that I have control of.
And I bet you're gonna move it before the Beach Road weekend.
You bet, and I'll be selling front second floor seats for
Yeah.
just half of what Beach Road charges. So what, couple $1,000 a pop?
Yeah.
Okay, and I have another part to my clarification.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, and now I understand where the location is, you intend to move the building, perhaps in pieces,
Nope,
perhaps whole.
no, in one.
Whole, you
in one
want to move
piece.
it whole to that location. And initially it will be stored in that location, but with the hope of making it permanent. Is that?
No, he's going to move it to, he's going to store it there temporarily until it's time to move it to the DeSorcy property, which Jeff and some other people, I believe, have purchased. And their plan is to relocate it there permanently, I believe, according to what is on the record. Is that still the plan?
It's very likely that we will permanently locate it at 51 Lagoon Pond at this point.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
new. Okay.
But it's possible it would be moved elsewhere. And if I understand our process, we're basically approving the movement of it to the Lagoon Pond location. if they want to take it yet someplace else, they'll be back to see us?
Well,
I will certainly be back to see you very soon with the plan for its permanent location and
Okay.
restoration.
Okay,
You know, if you know it, yes. So that will be once Chris and Safe Harbor, once we are each doing
Yep,
our own separate
yep.
thing.
I just have to say that I loved that building since
Me
I
too.
was an adolescent, and I'm 80 now. So that gives you some idea of how long I've known and loved that building. I hope you do find a good place for it, because I just think it's a
Well,
wonderful building.
yeah, and Linda, it was moved to that location from West Tisbury just before you were born.
I heard that.
Yeah.
That sort of increased my love for it.
Absolutely. And Abby Bird has been a wonderful resource for the history of Erford. And although the Vineyard 15 wasn't designed in it, I'll be storing my Vineyard 15 in it. So it's really wonderful. Yeah.
Yes, it's wonderful to look at, and it's actually historically extremely interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
so I
No,
believe-
it'll be,
Okay.
I'm excited to restore it so that people really do appreciate it the way they should.
Just to be entirely accurate, I believe all we approved was the removal of the building. I don't believe we specifically approved any location to which it was being removed. We
That's
assumed
true.
it was
Absolutely.
going to the
But,
source-
but when they go to move it, they may find that triggers a DOI.
They may.
It certainly, I imagine, will.
Okay,
But
Okay.
we just have to decide that we approve of their deconstruction scheme, demolition scheme.
all we have to do today is approve the demolition and plan. That's all they're here for,
And-
other than letting us
and-
know what's going on.
And we're not sending it to the full commission. This is our
This,
purview.
this was a review by land use planning based on condition number 20.
Okay, I'd like to move that we approve.
Let's just wait a second and hear from the other
Well,
committee.
you can discuss it after the motion.
Okay,
This is something that has puzzled me for years. One can have these discussions within the framework of a motion. We can also have them outside the framework, but
okay.
whatever.
It's been moved to approve the demolition plan. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Ben,
Yeah, two points, two questions. One, I think what was just came up in that discussion is, do we need to have some ability to track what happens to the building once it's moved? It's not necessarily the likelihood that whatever it is used for will require a DRI permit. And so what assurance does the MVC hold that the building is, used appropriately, et cetera? We should have some process, whether it's an affidavit by Mr. Dubard to come back to us to discuss it, whatever it is. I think there's something that we need to do so that we hold some control over that building's next iteration, next life, which I think is going to be great, but it's still, we need that assurance. The second piece is look, the demolition plan, the silt fencing, that's fine. The water, that's fine. Has there been any discussion on what the soils under the buildings are going to, what's going to happen to the soils under the buildings? Are they going to be removed? Are they going to be tested? Those buildings have been there for a long time. This would be an opportunity before racks are built to mitigate any potential pollution that exists on the site. Chris, what are you guys imagining when the buildings are removed and the soil there is being evaluated? Are you excavating and then putting in the gravel? What's the plan look like in that regard?
At this moment, when we demo, the concrete will come out. We plan on grading the site and just putting some gravel down until we start actual construction and we get those things settled, the design for the foundations, we don't know how deep we have to dig, whether we're putting pilings or helical. I don't have any of those plans yet, so I don't know how much we're gonna dig other than the drainage area. And if we dig and we find something, I mean, we're required to report it and deal with it. So, I mean, would say we're testing. If we find something, absolutely. I mean, if it's what I would assume, and I know assume's hard, but when I assume it, it's just kind of gross fill that's been filled in there over the 40 or 50 years before it was those buildings were built. I think it's going to be similar to what's the rest of the property, but yeah, I think it's about it for now.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's an opportunity for us to remove, if there is a pollutant that's sitting in that ground, you know, this is our opportunity to remove it. It's easy to miss that if it's not being looked for. I think there should be something in the plan that, you know, somebody, maybe it's Jane Barconda, the conservation agent. That's why I asked about the Conservation Commission. Had they put any order of conditions on the removal to potentially mitigate if there is a problem? Whether there's a problem or not, we don't know, but I think we should be looking to see if there's a problem, because this is our opportunity to remedy it before you build whatever you're going to build new.
They did not have any comment on that during our approval through them. So.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, just a couple comments. I believe our condition was that they save this building and it was going to be reclaimed by Mr. Dubard. And once it's off this property, it's no longer part of the DRI, that they've met their condition. As far as Ben's concerned, as once this is removed from the property, what is in the underlying soil, that should have been brought up in the original decision. That boat has sailed, and I think the applicant has gone head and shoulders above what most people would be required to do. They're gonna save the building. They're gonna move it wherever its final destination is. We don't know. We hope it's something that we approve of, but it's not going to be part of this DRI.
Fred?
Yes, I just wanted to point out that our DRI checklist item under demolition says demolition or relocation of a historic structure. But also, as Brian points out, one of the things that we hadn't really thought of is that this would actually involve two different properties. Thinking to the logical conclusion, on a relocation, it's the property that it's standing on now and the property that it's going to. So I think that's something that we perhaps need to think a little bit about in the future. I'm certainly not suggesting that we need to open a new DRI procedure on the relocation of this house to get it off the property. I think, though, it would be appropriate to make that something that has to happen at the new location. So we do have some control over it.
What do you mean? What has to happen at the new location?
So that, as Mr. DeBard has said, that he would probably come back to us. I think we're the thought about this, the relocation of a historic structure, is that we want to make sure that when a historic structure is moved, that it's still considered a historic structure on or at its new location. So that, say it's moved to another location, the property is sold, where it's moved to, the new owner of that can't just demolish the building.
I think
You see
that would be a violation of condition number 2. Condition number 2 basically says the building shall be preserved.
Right, and I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking for the future, what because we really haven't had a case where we've dealt with the relocation of a historic structure.
Yeah, I agree with Fred. I think he's right. And our checklist allows for this. So, Jeffrey Dubard can move the structure, temporarily house it. But when he understands what the final disposition of that building is going to be, he can come back for a DRI application showing that. And then that gives us the assurance that that historic structure is being preserved. And it's a checklist item. I mean, I was just looking at it. I think Fred is absolutely right there.
Yeah, but as of right now, that building shall be preserved, whether Mr. Dubard has it or someone else has it. Wherever he puts it, it shall be preserved, and that building is conditioned as such, and it can't be,
But it's a condition that Safe Harbors has to honor. But once Safe Harbors is released of that, they've done their part. They no longer have to care about, the disposition of that building. It's now Mr. Dubard's responsibility to come to us with an application when he's ready.
And that would be a separate DRI because
Yes.
it's a trigger of a demolition of an historic building. Okay, we've got that
And it's a
straight.
different piece of property.
Right.
That's the important thing as well.
Right. Okay, Linda, you had your hand up, and then we'll get to Jeff because
Two things. First of all, I am concerned about the condition of the soils when these buildings are removed. But I agree with whoever it was who said that boat has sailed. We should have included that as a condition in the decision, and we can't tack it on now because we're outside of that formal decision-making process. I think the boat has also to some degree sailed to some degree on the building because we didn't carefully enough condition it originally. We can't be sure that this building will constitute a DRI wherever it goes. That isn't, our checklist isn't written that way. If it poses any significant planning problems, we can hope that the Tisbury Planning Board or some other board in Tisbury would refer it to us under number 1. That's our real only option now with regard to conditioning the building further than we already have, I think.
I think you're incorrect about that, Linda. I believe the current checklist, because this is qualifies as an historic building because of its age, I believe, and this is what Ben and Fred have been indicating, any demolition or relocation of that building in the future, wherever it may be, is going to require, a review, a DRI review.
But they're not proposing to demolish it. I mean, yes, if they propose to
It's
demolish
not just
it,
demolishing, it's alteration, it's relocation.
Yes,
Just the
I agree.
relocation triggers a new DRI or the alteration. And
if they relocate it from wherever we're letting them take it right now.
No.
You
There's a
think this requires-
there's a DRI for Safe Harbor to relocate it. And then there's going to be a new DRI at that new relocated. There's 2 DRIs with the move, right? There's allowing them to relocate it, and then there needs to be a DRI once it's in its relocated location, how it's going to be altered, preserved, whatever. So, I mean, I think that's pretty clear in our checklist. And I disagree with Linda and Brian that the ship somehow has sailed. The whole idea of an LUPC coming back and reviewing a demolition plan, the demolition plan was the place where we talk about the soils. It hasn't sailed. The whole point we didn't talk about it in the beginning is because we agreed we can do that in LUPC when we look at a demolition plan. And demolition plan would have, what are the specifications for review and removal or mitigation of the soils around those buildings. And I'm not talking about the historic building. I'm talking about the ones that are being demolished.
I think I'm sorry. I think Ben is right about that. even if it was a building that was built 10 years ago, if they're demolishing it, there's a concern about the result of that. So, yeah, I
Especially given its proximity to the wetland.
yes.
Absolutely.
I think you're right, Ben. I
I'm
withdraw
just
any-
curious why that wasn't brought up in the hearing, that
It
should
was,
be brought
I
up.
brought it up in the hearing when I asked for this condition that we have a demolition plan that comes back to LUPC, so that we didn't have to go through this minutia in the hearing process, but we could review it with the understanding that the applicant has the permission to demolish the buildings, but we want to make sure that when the buildings are demolished, that we can mitigate the property as best as we can. There may not be a
Okay,
need.
so we've given them permission to do that during the DRI process, and now we're adding additional steps. I just don't think that's fair to the
Not
applicant.
adding additional steps, we're reviewing and approving a demolition plan, and the demolition plan would rightly say how they're going to mitigate any possibilities for soil that's been contaminated over the years from whatever use. Who knows? Maybe 50 years ago, somebody was using that gap between the two buildings as a place to dump oil, and the soil should be removed at this point. That's all I'm.
Okay, enough.
So if they had kept the building and decided not to take it down, we would not be concerned about the oil that's in the ground below that structure.
They wouldn't have been in front of us for a DRI.
Okay, let's not have all the crosstalk. I think the point has been made. We don't have to, if that is sufficiently important, we don't have to approve this particular plan, and they can go back and prepare a different plan. I would point out that if they, in demolishing the building, they observe evidence of contamination, they are obligated by state and federal law to test and investigate it and report it. Whether they have to affirmatively take soil samples at certain depths and check for contaminants is a different issue. And I have no recollection of us discussing that during the public hearing, and it certainly is not within the four corners of condition number 20. Now, before we discuss that any further, let us hear from the attorney for the applicant, Mr. Guard.
Good evening. How is everyone tonight?
Oh, we're just dandy.
Oh, we're doing great.
Argumentative.
So I was going to chime in. I was going to chime in as I chimed in earlier. Ben landed on exactly what I was going to say about condition 2 and relocating the building. So the safe harbor condition was that we would work with entities to attempt to relocate the building, try to. Doug's position that it shall be preserved is a little strong reading of that condition, but I think at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to achieve. We all know that. So Jeff agreeing to relocate it down the street would seem to me that our obligation at that point under that condition, as Ben has pointed out, would cease at that point. It would then become the responsibility of the third party. However, I don't think that at first I thought, well, Linda was right. This may or may not require a DRI, and that would be up to the building inspector for Tisbury to decide whether or not it is a development of regional impact. But with that having been said, with that building having its age being a factor for historical significance and the fact that it was a component part of our DRI, I can't imagine anyone issuing a demolition permit for that or a relocation permit or an alteration or extension of the structure without it being a DRI. I would not advise the client at that point. I would say, even if the building inspector said, no, you don't need one, I would say, you know what, you do, because it's a component of a previous DRI where that building was required to be preserved. So that having been said, I think you get all the way down to the end, which results in the building being moved, it being protected by the DRI process in perpetuity because of its age and because of its, in its location, I would think. So that was my comment on that. I do think Ben is right about the LUPCs, and I'm offering this as a olive branch on the LUPC's jurisdiction to condition a demolition plan in the sense of what the soils might look like under the building. I don't think my client has a problem with that. We've tested in other high impact areas for contamination and have had successfully found none. So we are willing to have a soil sample, a soil evaluator there when the foundation gets removed to make sure that we're not dealing with anything contaminated. If it is, of course, then we go forward. So again, I think Ben's right. I know that's probably not, it's counterintuitive to what most lawyers would say for their clients, but I think this client wants to get it right, no matter what. They want it right. So I believe that it's up to obviously it's up to the LUPC, but I believe that they have the authority to place a condition such as that, because it's a demolition plan. It's part of the demo plan.
That's called taking the high road, and I appreciate it a great deal, Steve. Do you wish to amend your demolition plan to specify what you will do?
Well,
I'm
I
not
think,
a big fan of wordsmithing in the midst of a land use planning committee meeting, because we always fuck it up.
that is, I'm happy to work with Chris to amend the demolition plan to include a soil evaluation prior to the backfill.
Okay.
And upon removal of the foundation. So yes, happy to do that.
I don't know when our next land use planning meeting is. If we were having one next week, I'm sure you could easily get it done by then, because it's probably gonna take you half an hour.
Doug, I would suggest, I mean, given that this applicant is willing to work with us and understands the need, that we could approve it, given what they've said tonight, and allow the executive director to review that language and determine, yep, that's adequate. We don't need to potentially see it again at LUPC. I would be happy to move that way. I feel they're trying to do it right. I think it's just on our end that we just want to have those assurances in place.
That would work.
We'd be great.
We would be basically saying that you are clarifying your demolition plan right now. You will memorialize that in the form of a supplemental letter or memo, send it to the executive director, and he will confirm that it meets what you've presented here. So Linda, is your motion to approve the demolition plan subject to what Mr. Bernard has clarified?
Actually, I might want to add one little thing. Perhaps we could add, so that we don't have to go over this again and again, that the applicant shall agree to abide by all federal, state, and local regulations concerning soil contamination.
I'm sure the applicant would agree to that. It is
It's
beyond,
clear
that's
they
beyond
want
belt
that.
and suspenders, though, because they have to do it.
Yes.
Well, I know, but it makes some of us happier if it is said. And that way, if there's ever any question in the future, which is what we write our decisions and, and LUPC permissions around, if anyone ever in the future looks at this, it will be evident that the conversation has occurred if we just include that little thing about abiding by state, federal, state, and local regulations.
Attorney Guard, are you willing to abide by the law?
Belts and suspenders is my motto, Doug.
Okay, Steve, well, throw that in your memo.
Okay.
Okay,
I wanted to throw that into my motion for approval.
okay. Now there's, and Jeff, I know you're there. I know you got something to say about the DRI issue. We will get to that. I'm trying to get this demo thing done. Okay, Fred.
Yes, I just wondered in the spirit of making sure we've got everything crossed here. Do we need to say that the applicant's responsibility on the building moving would terminate with the building leaving the property? So in other words, once he agrees, once the contract is signed and the building has left the property, they are no longer responsible for it in any way, or is that too obvious?
I think it's
No.
pretty obvious. They have signed a contract and it does have an indemnification provision in it to cover them. So
Again, it doesn't actually hurt for us to say it.
The person who's responsible for the building is a person in possession and ownership of the building, so I don't think. we
Okay,
need to say
so you don't think it needs to be said? Okay,
I really don't think it needs to be said. The contract is pretty tight. Okay. There's a motion to approve the demolition plan and waste control is what the name of it is, demolition plan and waste control, as clarified by the applicant to include a protocol for testing the soil beneath the buildings for contaminants. They will abide by all federal, state, and local laws regarding environmental pollution. That's the motion. It's been seconded. The applicant will clarify, memorialize its clarification, and that will be confirmed by the executive director. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of that approval of the demolition plan and waste control, kindly raise your hand where I can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All opposed, raise your hand. All abstaining, raise your hand. Christina, you did not vote. Okay. You were voting in favor. So, okay, that was unanimous. Okay, we have approved the demolition plan as clarified by the applicant. Thank you for all of that, Steve.
Thank
But
you, folks. Thank
don't
you.
go away yet, because you may be involved in this next discussion. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Oh, sure. I was just going to say, and Ben mentioned it, I'm more than happy to execute an affidavit that, in some period of time, 30, 45 days, I'll come back. And that I certainly won't do anything to demolish or, cause harm to the building without coming back in the future. Right? These are famous last words, but I'm fairly certain you guys are going to be pleased with my intentions.
I'm sure we will be. So yeah, if you memorialize that in a letter to the DRI coordinator, I think that's sufficient.
Okay.
And then you'll come back to us when your plan with regard to that building is clear.
Yes.
And you understand that at least this group believes that there's an extremely high likelihood that it will be trigger something on the DRI checklist, but we'll see.
Yep. Right.
Okay. Anything further of this august group? Okay, I believe we have completed our work. Thank you, Jeff, Chris, and Steve. I appreciate your clarity, and I think we're done. Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Take care.
Take care.
Adjourned.
Doug,
Yes.
as you know, I have a transportation issue. I'm wondering if we're going to continue to meet virtually as the LUPC.
Oh, yes, we are going to meet virtually at LUPC until the end of time, I hope.
Yeah, or the
But-
government says we can't. Okay,
Yeah, until the
I
government-
just wanted to clarify that.
And
Yeah,
we,
I spoke to the executive director today on that very question, and he, as the chairman just said, believed that it would be indefinitely.
Okay, and then I have one other question,
yep,
which has to do with eligibility to participate remotely in the full commission meetings, the hybrid meetings. I'm going to have hip surgery in early June. If I'm strapped to a bed, does that qualify me as much as being in Abu Dhabi?
I believe it probably will. I think that medical reasons are that and being away are the two reasons. And Lucy is nodding her head that way. I think
Also
if-
military service, but that doesn't, I don't think that applies to anyone that we have on the
Okay.
commission right now.
Yeah, I got the
think
getting
all
away
military.
part. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know if you had a real legitimate, not I'm feeling lazy tonight, but
No.
a real legitimate reason to not come. I mean, I could always pull a sheet around me and say that I'm in Abu Dhabi. I don't know why that's my,
Generally, Linda, just for the general rule seems to be any reason that would allow you to rehabilitate is also a reason that you can participate remotely.
If you got a medical reason, you'll be fine.
That's good. Yeah,
I think all you have
Yeah,
to do
well-
is send an email to Joan about it.
I haven't looked carefully at the clock, nor do I know exactly what my rehabilitation time will be, but I'm having a hip replacement, so I will, as my husband pointed out to me, mainly have trouble getting in and out of cars.
Well, get it replaced and then, once you're ready to attend in live, we will do what we did on Thursday. Okay, you're muted.
This isn't until early June, so for now, it is as was.
Well, we have a meeting on the 18th of May and we'll do what we did last week. Okay?
That'll be cool. Okay. Thank
Now
you.
we can all leave. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.